to talk about the Hollywood Blacklist and a couple of different facets of this. One related to jab restrictions. I will limit my language here, and the rest just being the general concept that we all know is true, but don't want to. But Hollywood wants to pretend like it isn't, which is that conservatives have a much harder time in Hollywood than the people with a standard left-wing agenda. So it says Adam Carolla says that actors fear even criticizing C-19 rules. Are we allowed to say that word again?
Let's avoid
I think we are. I say it all the time. But so he basically talks about how he's one of the few celebrities to acknowledge that Hollywood's blacklist exists against conservative talent. They get into a lot about the concept of restrictions. They get into a lot about the concept of the 1950s blacklist, the McCarthy era blacklist, no commies allowed. And they talk about how they've kind of started monetizing that time in history, whether it's movies like Trumbo, it became a plot in Being the Ricardos. There's documentaries that have been made about it. They absolutely love to glorify it without acknowledging that the same thing is essentially still going on in the industry.
What do you mean glorify it?
Well, they like to monetize it by turning it into stories. Like
Sure.
I saw Trumbo.
I don't think it glorifies it though. I think they want the appearance of exposing an ugly past, but hiding simultaneously they're hiding an ugly present.
Or they're just ignorant to it.
I don't think they're ignorant. I'm not letting them off that easy.
I feel like some of the people who write these things are just that ignorant.
The blacklist of McCarthyism has kind of been inverted. So
we're at the other end of the spectrum
so quickly.
So it says
whiplash.
Clifton Duncan was a classically trained performer with an impressive resume, and he can no longer work because he refused the COVID-19. Too late now, guys. I think we're okay with it. But also, when Greg Ellis was here, he talked a lot about the crazy restrictions because of how monetized that industry is there. And my biggest complaint, the thing that always made me want to cover this, is the pictures. I do follow some actors on Instagram, if only to keep up with their work. Usually I don't see eye to eye with them on political beliefs or social beliefs. But one thing seems to be steadfast is that when you see pictures from behind the scenes, it's always a bunch of crew members with masks on and actors with no masks on, which always makes me think of like a caste system.
When that happened at the Met Gala,
Yes,
especially in an event that's supposed to showcase art and show that like mainstream celebrities can overlap with the art world and do something highbrow when ordinarily their performances are so lowbrow. And then you juxtapose that with their literal servants on the sidelines.
Like Hillary Clinton, there's the picture of Hillary
You
Clinton.
can't disguise what's going on.
Yep. It was like tax the rich, but mask the poor.
Yeah.
It was so disturbing.
The obvious answer here is Gina Carano making a very generic statement about they make you hate your neighbors before the government makes you hate your neighbors before they do anything. It was the most generic thing ever. If you guys remember, I don't know how much you followed that case when it happened.
It was just a meme.
Pedro Pascal posted like a meme where he basically called half the country, tiny mustache man sympathizers. Again, I don't know if you're Yahtzees. I like Yahtzee. Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
alt-right Yahtzees. So
it could be talking about Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, which would be so unfair.
And when I think about what Greg Gutfeld was saying with Adam Carolla is like the number one thing that you notice with them is like they get no promotion from the machine. Meaning like Gutfeld is successful in spite of the machine. Similar in comics, ESOM #1 with Eric D. July. If we didn't know, if I didn't tell you guys, or you didn't follow an industry that told you that this dude made $3.5 million on a single comic book, you would never know from the mainstream comic book industry that was a thing, because they just close their eyes and pretend that
they selectively report.
Yeah.
They over-report on non-news, and then something actually noteworthy happens that goes against their narrative. It's memory hole.
This is one of my favorite things I ever learned from listening to Michael Malice. And I used to say mainstream press all the time, but he's like, don't call it mainstream press. It's not mainstream. They're corporate press. They don't reflect the mainstream. Just like what you're saying, like
legacy.
Yeah, it's just legacy stuff. They are in their own little world, and they just promote themselves. But there's people like Gutfeld are actually getting big because the real world is into that.
Yeah.
They want to see something that's authentic, unlike Stephen Colbert.
There's a certain level of authenticity that not being promoted by the machine affords you. I think we're beneficial to that in a lot of ways, because we're given the freedom to talk about what we want here, and discuss the things we want to discuss, and we're never going to be talked about on any type of mainstream site. I mean, maybe they'll say something negative about us someday. That might be a badge of honor one day, to one day be called something by a bunch of people that are
be slandered by the corporate press.
I look forward to it. So
that's the new Oscar. That's the new Emmy.
And then they get into basically the one thing that I noticed when I started looking up this stuff was that a lot of people, it's kind of like the concept of cancel culture, where some people say it exists, other people say it doesn't exist, but it's so nebulous that you don't really have a way of. You can't prove there's not an actual list on a piece of paper.
The nature of this topic is, there's the C-19 Hollywood blacklist, or there's the so-called conservative blacklist, or a blacklist of people who are just generally difficult to work with. Yep. And there are multiple different ones. They're unofficial. No one, they overlap, but it's been broken up into all of these different categories. Some of them pay attention to only one. And it just becomes a sort of standoff where everyone feels like they are on the precipice of getting ousted from this industry. And I think that's why so many headlines come up of celebrities just saying outlandish things, because they're set up for the press, failure that way.
The corporate press does a fantastic job of laying it in there where they're like, I can't wait to clip this piece of audio.
The media outlets are just as much playing the game with these celebrities as they are with each other.
Mm-hmm. I do my best, when I'm naming the clips for segments, I try to keep it I mean, I goad you into making editorialized titles,
but
in general I try to keep it as general as possible. Thank you. Because I'm not I really hate when they do the cutesy pie editorializing, where it's a bunch of people. Elon Musk said that the rings of power suck, because of course he did.
The thing is, cancel culture, or whatever you want to call it, is a self-sufficient self-nourishing organism that you don't really need someone to be in charge of it for it to continue existing. It exists to propagate its own existence, and there's no one keeper of this ledger that keeps track of everyone's mistakes.
It's just word of mouth. Word of mouth becomes not a toxic
because
form,
of the nature of how people have a collective impulse. You don't really need to have any centralized authority on who is canceled, who's blacklisted, or who is acceptable.
My favorite part was did you watch the Alec Baldwin part where he talks about it? In it, he talks.
Do you want to show it?
I think it's pretty long. I don't know if we can, but basically, there's a point where he talks about there was bad behavior in the past, 1950s Hollywood, where you'd be drunk, you'd get DUIs, you go away for a couple of years or a year, and you apologize, and you come back later. That's one thing. But he talks about, he refers to John McCain as a real American.
He's so old.
It's just such it's very boomer. And he shows a fundamental lack of understanding of what Americans actually seem to want from their media, which I found to be the funniest part. But he also talks about how in the one interview, and I want to make sure I find it, where he talks about one of the things about getting blacklisted is you have to get through an actor's publicist first, right? They would want to do a show, and then the publicist will look into your work and say, we can't have you going on there. He says they're progressive by default because they have to be, whether they
not because that's their conscience that tells them.
But it's pragmatic for them to be, because they understand that if you go on Adam Carolla's show, and I actually enjoy his podcast is very left and right field topics that you wouldn't imagine him covering, kind of like what we do. He gets more political than we do, but like he definitely covers like the gamut of runs the gamut of stuff to actually cover, which I enjoy. But he points out, like, I use it as kind of a barometer. If I see somebody go on his show, I understand that person is probably not necessarily right-leaning, but at least centrist enough to have a conversation with you.
A real conversation.
And it shouldn't need to be that way. Nope. It shouldn't be a barometer for what somebody's beliefs are. Whether they
I think the same thing might be going on, like something like Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Yeah,
as trite as that is, and as much as we've like made fun of the name of it and the whole concept,
cancel culture.
It is still a tepid reaction
Bill
to
Maher
this blacklist culture.
Bill Maher has different people from various sides on.
Yeah,
they can mostly
he's a good example of somebody who, like, even if you disagree with him, he kind of is more willing to.
Well, he's someone who doesn't threaten people.
Yeah.
Right.
That's like, because so many people in Hollywood and in the whole entertainment industry are psychopaths, as I've said, like, because they have to be in order to succeed. They're the types of people who will just kind of casually threaten people they work with. And if you're not like that, you're the exception.
Carolla described what he faced when he tried to hire writers for Truth Yeller. He says these people don't want to work for the Daily Wire, not because they're against the Daily Wire, but because they don't want to be blacklisted in Hollywood. That is a blacklist. Well, it may not be written down. This is where you have to actually tell people and like guide them to like use your brain. There's not a master list in an office. Like when you go to a Target and a person's stolen from there a bunch of times. I used to work at a Target, so I'd be in like the asset protection office. You see like the pictures of the people that are like repeat offenders. There's not a master list in a thing where it says don't work with this person. It's a bunch of people in group chats and in chain emails through studios.
Insiders.
Yes.
Right. That makes it more nefarious and pervasive.
Yes.
It's like there's not like one thing you got to worry about. It's just like this. Like
and no one is
organism.
safe.
Yeah, you're never.
So
safe.
it kind of prevents people from sharing their beliefs. I know Zachary Ty Bryan. I remember this all the way back. It was like 4 years ago. He was from the original Home Improvement.
Okay. And
he talks about he works more behind the scenes now. He says a lot of the people who work behind the camera are blue. They're not making. You go to California, right? You go to Los Angeles, and it's like there's no middle ground. It's mansions and tents.
Right.
And the people that work behind the scenes are blue collar people,
Yep.
and a lot of them have very different views that they don't have any power to speak out against what they believe. Gina Carano was able to do so on sheer will and the knowledge that she had a previous career and would be going elsewhere because of a natural talent in front of the camera that she had the faith in that she would be able to use further. In that industry, where do you go? There's only so many jobs at the Daily Wire that they can hire.
That's kind of what Kanye West was referring to when he said everyone who's in LA is there for the check.
Exactly.
Anyway, that's true from the very top to the very bottom.
Yep.
So true.
So if this is one of those things where, like, how is this any better? We're not any better off than we were in 1950.
By the way, in case this even needed to be mentioned, it's just hilarious that Alec Baldwin, of all people, is the one pointing out Hollywood blacklists when he's himself is not blacklisted after killing someone.
Yep.
Whether or not it was on purpose.
There was an article. I don't think I pulled it up, but I was originally going to like make it a jab at him, where it's like his production company is also like pushing the blame off now, saying it's not our fault that Helena Hutchins died on
The
set.
things that are considered excusable in Hollywood.
Well, that's the funniest
and the things
part,
that are
right?
consider irredeemable, like
who you vote for.
the terms of these blacklists.
Like that's what I'm saying. Like it's like it doesn't matter. Like did you abuse a family member? Sure, fine. But did you vote the right way? And did you say something mean on Twitter? Mm-hmm. If you said something mean on Twitter, we can't forgive that.
Yep. Yeah.
But if you were abusive to and I think that the more rational-minded people should believe in what Olivia Wilde claimed to believe in, which is restorative justice, right?
That's right.
You should have the right to make amends for your mistakes and come out the other end better than you were before. But they don't actually believe in that, not in any actual sense.
Ultimately, what Olivia Wilde was saying about restorative justice was about restoring the bottom line for her film.
Where she proves to be the most male acting female director I've ever seen, as she sleeps with her co-star with her younger actors.
Frontman.
Yes, she's channeling her inner inner Weinstein.
Alec Baldwin is from the old school Hollywood where you still had a redemption arc. Like, that's why I'm still thinking I have hope for Brittany in this redemption arc. But like this new world, there is no redemption arc. You just split off from this industry and you go to the Daily Wire, and that's, I guess, it.
Baldwin,
where else you go.
He's also very clearly, like, he still believes we're in a world where, like from watching what I watched on his video, he doesn't believe it is like a two-party system. He doesn't understand that it's like mainstream Democrats and Republicans are just the same. It's the same thing now.
I love that. I love that.
A neocon and a neoliberal aren't really. A Republican is just a Democrat. Going the speed limit.
Hollywood reaching out to the like elitist uniparty either side, like McCain. That's what I'm saying. They think they're giving an olive branch to the other side, but that's just the same. It's just the same warmonger as the people you thought you loved before too.
That was the part that I thought was funny. It's like, I didn't really want to cover it because that's the political side of it. I don't really care about that. I care about the fact that there's a blacklist at all, and it shouldn't be a thing. And he kind of goes back and forth. He goes, it's unfortunate that it has to exist. I'm like, obviously you don't really believe that.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
And there are exceptions too.
Oh yes.
Like Mark Wahlberg, for example, or Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson just has those two both have so much money and influence now that they're kind of like safeguarded from it. But you're not allowed to be a new. I guess you could be the child of one of those people, but
maybe
Alec has had a lot of falls from grace and come back. The messages he left for his daughter, you've heard those from years ago, where he calls her like a pig and stuff.
What?
You got to go back and hear those.
Ugh.
I mean, he's had a lot of insane things, and he's in one of my favorite movies. I love Beetlejuice. About to watch that soon as it's getting a little Halloweeny out.
The one thing that kind of struck me about all this is it all feels very like the old world is gone, and they haven't realized that yet. They still believe that world is going to come back.
It's
been gone, and they don't realize that. I don't know if they'll come to realize that someday. I think that's part of being in a bubble. It's very hard to escape your information bubble. Even here, like you have to be like, I'm always kind of asking myself, am I the crazy person? Right. I think you always have to check yourself against that. And I don't think that Jennifer Lawrence the other day having her nightmares of Tucker Carlson and not realizing that that's insane because you're in a bubble. Or talking about how like you're separating from your family over stuff is
what punk rock singer just came out like threatening people. Dropkick Murphys. They have no, like, they can't hear themselves.
No.
And they're becoming, like what usually happens, the very thing they said they hated. Yep. Where they just become actually violent. Like they're frothing at the mouth, and they're ideologues. It should be terrifying to see these people do it and then getting on magazine covers for it.
I want to it's really interesting because I'm going to keep an eye on stories involving the idea of the Hollywood blacklist, because I think it's one of those things where there's more discussions worth having, and the more people that talk about it, the easier it is for people to come out and speak about it. Because I do think at a certain point, it does speak to like just how comfortable they feel to say whatever the hell they want, and how uncomfortable they've made everyone else feel.
They don't understand what it implies.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And shout out to Clifton Duncan, who's been in this studio before, I believe, and was one of the first people I remember on Twitter when the all crazy stuff was happening with the whatever words I can't say, and he was super brave. I remember following him. I was like, oh wow, I love this. And I remember seeing him like kind of fall from New York, leaving New York and becoming this. It's awesome and inspirational.
Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.